The Egypt and Jordanian coalition threats Israel. The King of Jordan and President Abdel Nasser of Egypt signed a joint defense agreement on May 30, 1967. The news came as a shock to both Egyptians and foreigners, since King Hussein was often criticized for leaning too much toward the West. 2 days earlier, the president had called the king an imperialist stooge, but it seems that they have found a common enemy in Israel, as quoted by the BBC on this day. Sunday, May 30, 2021, tensions in the region had escalated over the previous 3 weeks since Egypt increased its military presence on the Sinai Peninsula and expelled UN emergency forces from Egyptian territory. On May 22, President Nasser closed the Straits of Tiran, the sea shipping route to Israel. 5 days later he declared, "Our basic aim is the destruction of Israel. The Arabs want to fight." On May 30th, King Hussein came to Egypt without notice, to be greeted suddenly by President Nasser. 5 hours later, Cairo radio announced the two leaders had signed an agreement stating that the two countries consider any attack against either of them an attack on both of them and will take steps including the use of armed forces to rebuke such attacks. The 5-year agreement paved the way for the creation of a joint defense and command council. General Mohammed Fawzi, Egypt's chief of staff, will lead military operations in the event of war. After the agreement was signed, President Nasser thanked beloved King Hussein for coming to Cairo and said the differences between their countries had been erased in a moment. King Hussein then flew back to the Jordanian capital, Amman, accompanied by the chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Ahmed Shukari. He is in charge of commando forces in the Gaza Strip bordering Israel. Israel says the pact has greatly increased the dangers of an all-out war between Israel and Arab countries. After a period of relative peace in the Middle East, Palestinian guerrilla groups, supported by Egypt and Syria, began a series of attacks on the Israeli border in 1965. This was followed by Israeli retaliation and the gradual buildup of Arab military forces around the Israeli border. When diplomatic efforts by Britain and the US failed, Israel took decisive action on June 5, 1967. It launched a massive deterrent offensive that paralyzed the Egyptian Air Force, then seized the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt in the south, and the strategic Golan Heights from Syria in the north. It also pushed Jordanian forces out of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, uniting the once divided Holy City. The offensive ended on June 10 and became known as the Six-Day War. It changed the face of the Middle East conflict. It also displaced around 500,000 Palestinians who fled to Egypt, Syria, Lebanon and Jordan. Egypt and Jordan are the only Arab countries that have since made peace with Israel.